friend. Welcome to the study. Today we're going to visit a beautiful, beautiful garden near Rome, as well as a villa of the Emperor Hadrian near Tivoli. We're going to see the village of Tivoli and its beautiful estates, including the famous Villa d'Este with all of its fountains and water gardens. And then we'll look at Hadrian's villa and the ruins of this magnificent villa and estate. But first, let's have some tea. So we have this beautiful green rose tea for a lovely rainy summer morning. Do you like that sound? And it smells beautiful with green and rosy garden smells. There's a painting of one of the villas in Tivoli, the Villa Gregoriana, with its terraced gardens and temple follies overlooking the Italian countryside. It's a beautiful landscape area with a river gorge and high cliffs. And here's the entrance to the Villa d'Este. Very unassuming from the front. In the village streets, cobbled and old, where the bishops and cardinals used to have their beautiful homes in the countryside. Here we will see the Villa d'Este, Tivoli, Arocapia, Villa Gregoriana, Hadrian's villa, and it says plastic of Hadrian's villa. It means sculptures and a map. So I'll show you the map itself too. Hadrian's villa, there's the Villa d'Este and Hadrian's villa. So we'll look at those as well, with all of these wonderful pictures and photographs. And here is a plan of the interior of the Villa d'Este. You can see all the rooms and how this part of the building is different from this part. So there were two buildings put together, or one later construction. And it tells the names of each of the rooms, and today they house art exhibits. And there is a plan of the gardens, the atrium there, so you can see how extensive the gardens are. Put that over there. And there's this plaque made of tiles outside the Villa d'Este. conceived and commissioned by Ippolito d'Este II, who was cardinal, lived from 1509 to 1572. Cardinal of Ferrara, and son of the famous Lucrezia Borgia and Alfonso d'Este. So this is the height of the Renaissance. Cardinal of Ferrara had a brilliant ecclesiastic and diplomatic career which began when he was 10, when he was named Archbishop of Milan. At age 30, thanks to the support of King Francis I of France, to whose court Ippolito had represented the d'Este family for some time, Pope Paul III made him a cardinal. So you see how easy it was to become cardinal in those days if you had money and connections. At the conclave of Julius III, 1549 to 1550, d'Este was elected governor of Tivoli. He believed that Tivoli's vicinity to the center of the temporal power of the Church would facilitate his ambitious plans for the future. Ippolito d'Este took office on September 9th, 1550. Accustomed as he was to the pomp and luxury of courtly life, he decided to build a new villa on the site to serve as a pleasant rustic retreat, suitable for long private meetings. The Tivoli residence was to be a counterpart to the magnificent palace he had begun building at Monte Giordano in the center of Rome, which he intended to use for receptions and to sustain and foster valuable city friendships. This is how Villa d'Este was born. Ippolito d'Este had at his disposal a great architect, Piero Ligorio, and an enormous number of artists and craftsmen. Buildings and pathways materialized with a speed that would be considered modern even by today's standards. The rapid completion of the work represented one of the few satisfactions for the cardinal. The difficulties he encountered in political life, the plots woven against him, and tiresome power struggles quickly laid to rest his aspirations to the papacy, and he died in 1572, attended by only a few servants, after having been expelled from the state of the Church by Pope Paul IV, following a conviction for simony. And followed more cardinals owning this beautiful palace. And there we see some of the interior. Lavish painting and large rooms with beautiful sculptures. Very intricate and richly done. And there we see a painting of the birth of Venus. And some of these sculptures were collected from ruins of the ancient world. So lots of very valuable pieces. And here's the balcony, and the gardens descend below it, with a fountain there, and the water reservoir there. And if you're touring Rome on a hot day, it's a beautiful time to visit Tivoli in the afternoon. is the D'Este coat of arms, where you can see the French fleur-de-lis and the Medici eagle, and my favorite, the 100 fountains in a long walk. Here they're lit up at night, interspersed with sculptures of eagles. And there are 2 basins into which these fountains go, and the beautiful patterns of spray above. At different times of the year, you can see the greenery hanging down towards the basins like this. In the shade of these trees, some of them poplar, olive, and ivy, and the sound of the water splashing. And here we have the fountain of the Orvato, lit up at night, and during the day you can see the grotto-like stones and hanging gardens, and little places in there for quiet meetings in the heat of the day, in the coolness behind the fountain. It says the center of this is a statue of victorious Rome sculpted by Pietro Lamonte from a design by Ligorio, along with Romulus and Remus, and tells about the marble sculptures that were put along the 100 fountains there. So no expense was spared at the material and sculptures. There's the Sibyl of Tibur, and here you can see people walking under this fountain, the Orvato, behind the water. And there is the onion. You can see his beard as he's reclining. The fountain of the organ, shady and attractive lane, leads to a clearing where stands the fountain of the organ, so named because it was once connected to a water-driven mechanism that imitated the sounds of an organ. I think we should break for some more tea. Does that sound like a fountain? And here we can see the fountains at the fountain of the organ, and the shady path to the right of the fountain of the Orvato leads to the fountain of the dragons. And there you see the dragon sculptures and the fountains, all the water going into them. A walkway up here, fountains above, shady fish ponds, further downhill, made up of 3 large rectangular basins arranged in a row, bordered by lush vegetation and animated by thin jets which spring up from the vases that decorate the balustrades, and also the fountain of Proserpina, architecturally similar to the fountain of the owl, was designed to bring together 2 separate levels of the villa. And there is the owl fountain, the French fleur-de-lis for the family of d'Este. And here the fish ponds with the fountain of Neptune and another balustraded balcony there. And you can see the beautiful reflections in the fish pond. This is Neptune's fountain lit up at night. And you can see the many levels. Isn't it beautiful? Can you imagine the sound of the rushing water cooling and relaxing you? Here we have the fountain of the Pegasus and the dried fountain of Ariadne. Let's see if we can find some information on Ariadne. The graceful fountain of Ariadne, no longer adorned by its original statuary, retains all of its simple charm. Situated on the panoramic side of the park overlooking the Roman countryside. The fountain of Neptune and the fountain of nature, or the one that I like to call the fountain of 1,000 boobies. The fountain of nature, the only other fountain of interest in the fountain of nature. So says this book, although I think there are several more interesting fountains here. This one taken from the hydraulic organ, the work of Giglio della Vallita. It is a likeness of the many-breasted Diana of Ephesus, which symbolized the eternally fecund nature and unstoppable flow of life. And there you can see some of the tall trees and trimmed hedges and the rotunda of cypresses, the cypress trees, and Neptune again. And here we have the village of Tivoli. Tivoli is reached by the Via Tiburtina, the ancient Roman consular road, which takes its name from Tivoli itself. The town was called Tibur in Roman times, after the legendary Tibertus, venerated as founder of the city, with his brother Catulus. Catulus gave his name to the hill which dominates Tivoli. Riding on the right bank of the Anian River, set atop the first pre-Apennine buttress which suddenly rears up after the vast expanse of Roman plain, Tivoli occupies a wonderful panoramic position after traveling along the winding Via Tiburtina that climbs up the green olive-clad hill. The large Piazza Garibaldi, bordered on the left by spacious panoramic terrace, offers views onto the entire plain and Rome in the distance. So there are some very beautiful paintings of the villas of Tivoli from the 18th and 19th centuries, when the Grand Tour was popular. You can see all of these structures and even ruins of the Villa Maniolo Vopisco, Roman consul, 114 AD, in the Villa Gregoriana. And there's the waterfall of the river. Many paintings of that. So is the temple of Vesta, the edge of the cliff there. A very beautiful location. Now before we go to Hadrian's villa, let's have a look at a plan of the Villa d'Este. Can you see all the fountains? This one is a ship representing the city of Rome and the Tiber River. The fountain behind it, buttressed up on the edge of the cliff. And of course the rest of Tivoli behind the villa there. You can see all of the places that we saw in the photographs, like the 100 fountains along here. The circle of cypress there. The fountain with the little grottos. Neptune. The fish ponds. And this tells you the names of them all. So the one I told you about is Statue of Rome. Let's go to Hadrian's villa. Hadrian, famous in Britain for having had a wall built along the border of the Pictic tribes in modern-day Scotland. When Publius Ellis Hadrian assumed power on the 2nd of August 117 AD, the Roman Empire was at its maximum extent and power. The second Spanish-born Roman emperor, later Trajan. Hadrian was a wise politician and a first-rate military commander. Despite numerous victories, he understood that Rome's conquering period had come to an end, and that the empire needed stability above all else. Perhaps the most complex and compelling of all Roman emperors, Hadrian was a highly cultured man. He appreciated all forms of art, but had a special passion for architecture, which he indulged even while traveling. In England, Hadrian rebuilt London in 122 AD, about 60 years after the fire, and he also constructed the famous Vallum, a long defensive wall that was named after him. In Athens, where he spent much of his time trying to strengthen Rome's eastern boundaries against the incipient threat of barbarian invasion, the emperor carried out conspicuous restoration projects and enriched the city with new buildings of great beauty. Hadrian understood the strongest cultural and civil needs of his time and brought together the refinements of Greek culture and the traditional governing skills which the Romans had developed over the centuries. This combination was embodied in the villa he built. The charming mix of ruins and natural landscape makes it a powerful romantic attraction, and the deeply innovative nature of Hadrian's architecture is self-evident in each building. It's a vast complex of ruined structures, and it's an absolute pleasure to explore. Here we have a semicircular nymphaeum of Canopus, Egyptian god. Hadrian had also been to Egypt and was fascinated by what he saw there, the history and the culture. Here's a wall for one side of the complex, and the lake with the wall ruins in the background. The Canopus. Great supply of water was one of the leading factors that ultimately convinced Hadrian to select this site for his villa. Water plays the chief role in the Canopus, the most celebrated part of the complex. Reflections of some of the ruins of Hadrian's architectural fantasies shimmer in the water, in the long basin set in the small buttressed valley. The name Canopus, the only certain one among all the structures of the villa, recalls an Egyptian settlement near modern Abukir, a town not far from Alexandria, celebrated in antiquity for its magnificence. But for Hadrian, the site remains sadly linked to the memory of his beloved Antonus, who drowned himself there. Some of the sculptured portraits of this beautiful, effeminate youth were found in the Canopus, their reflections in the water recalling the mythological Narcissus, also a symbol of an inextricable, tragic combination of beauty, youth, and death. And here part of the large bathhouse complex, the Frigidarium and Thermae. And describing three peristyles of the imperial palace and the quadriporticus with a fish pond. You can see what it must have been like all around, with the bathhouse at the end. A luxurious place for a country estate and villa. And here, or the Canopus, with what's left of a crocodile from the River Nile, or sculpture of one anyway, and a statue of Mars. Here, some pillars left over from the Golden Square. You can see the Egyptian influence in one of the fallen capitals. The lotus design. The room of the Doric pillars, very nicely preserved there, the top. And the island, or the villa of the island, formerly the Maritime Theatre. A few steps from the west side of the library courtyard is the most unique and, along with the Canopus, best known structure of Hadrian's villa. Here too, water plays the chief role. A moat encircles the tiny island, upon which is a little villa formed by a series of differently designed rooms, all arranged around a small courtyard, with porticos and a fountain with convex sides. The moat is surrounded with a corridor-like portico with 40 iconic columns placed on a low wall. access to the island is by 2 wooden drawbridges. Here we have a fountain with lion heads, feet, and wings, and the Temple of Venus. We can see there. And there's our map of Hadrian's villa. You can see how large this complex was. So the canopus there, and the large porthole, well, how it would have looked in Hadrian's day, covered walkways and tiered floors. The thermae bath complex there, and our fish pond there, quadriporticus and nymphaeum. The theatre, and we have our guest rooms over here, as well as the Greek and Latin libraries, each separate from each other, a gymnasium, a Greek theatre. So our Greek theatre is down here, and the Academy of Venus up here. What a wonderful complex to wander around in the summer on a trip to Rome. Thank you for coming on this little tour with me, my friend. I hope you've enjoyed the sounds and the beautiful photographs. Be good to yourself, be kind to others, and as always, be extraordinary.